Welcome. We're so glad you've joined us as we return today to the Anita B. Gorman Discovery Center at 4750 Troost Avenue here in Kansas City, Missouri. So for Native Plants at Noon, this is really the mothership. This is where it all began when Deep Roots did the COVID lockdown pivot, transition two-step into taking our educational programming virtual in spring of 2020. And it was such a game changer for our community. In fact, many of us here today may very well have first joined the Deep Roots family during that time. And certainly everyone with us today is familiar with Kansas City's native landscape eco-sheroes, Alix, Daniel, and Cydney Ross. I'm Chris Cardwell, Program Manager with Deep Roots, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Lunch and Learn here at Anita Gorman. Cyd and Alix are always so excited to show you what's blooming, and especially excited today that we're going to be showcasing Cydney's garden baby of her design, the Primrose Prairie, which is at its show-stopping peak this month. And you've got to get there in person, if possible, ASAP. But for today, this sneak peek is going to blow your bloomometers off the charts. Being at the Discovery Center in June is like being in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. This is where the real party is happening right now. And nothing inspires the native gardener in me like seeing a well-designed, diligently maintained, intentional native ecosystem. And who better to take us there than two of the passionate stewards of that space, the Missouri Department of Conservation darlings, Cydney and Alix. So before we begin, I'd like to let you know about a couple of upcoming native plant opportunities. If you like to get your hands dirty while nerding out about native plants, join them right there at the Discovery Center 3 times a month for our Work and Learn gardening sessions. Cydney leads these work days and promises that it's not only a ton of fun, but a great educational opportunity as well to see in real time what this is like. So our next work day is this Saturday, June 17th from 8 to 10 a.m. And a sign-up link has just been posted for the volunteer opportunity links in our chat today. And then next month, join us on July 6th for our Lunch and Learn webinar on exploring the beautiful and delicate relationships between native ecosystems and our human agricultural production. Our agrarian livelihoods can have effects on native landscapes, but synergy between the two is possible. And so our guests are going to be Farmer Dan Kroll and Jacob Canyon, regenerative ag and natural resource consultants with Good Oak LLC. And it's sure to be a mind-opening experience. Very good conversation. During today's program, if you have questions, again, throw them in the Q&A. If you got comments, we're just chatting over here in the chat as well. And this is going to be recorded. So stay tuned to our YouTube as we post these on the regular. A big thanks to the Missouri Department of Conservation for their partnership, for their support of this and all of our programming. And I'd like to turn it over to my favorite plant nerds and yours, Cyd and Alix. You live at Primrose Prairie.
We're here, Chris.
Hello.
Wow, what an introduction. I don't think we'll ever be able to top that.
I laughed, I cried, I felt so many things. That was wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for the introduction. This is Alix.
That's Cydney.
And we are the native landscape people here at the Discovery Center. I'm so used to my old title. So now I'm actually the outdoor education manager for Deep Roots. And Alix is the native landscape specialist here. But I still steward the landscape, the 9 acres here at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center in Kansas City. So I'm going to turn the camera over to Alix because we have so many blooms to talk about today.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here we go. Okay.
Here we go.
All right. So we're going to start actually on the back side, or what I consider the back side of Primrose Prairie, because I want to show you how much shade this prairie-inspired garden actually receives. I'll kind of talk more about this as I get into the details, but first we just want to show you an overview of what's blooming. So Alix, if you want to start down here at this corner, I just want folks in the audience to be able to see this very tall prairie planting behind Primrose Prairie, because that is exactly what this space looked like before. Definitely turn back and look over here. So we, back in 2020, I was given the opportunity to design this garden strip here. And so I had so much fun doing it. I spent all winter. I designed it with over 20 species in mind and packed it very tightly at the suggestion of Alix to help deter weed competition and to make it fill out much quicker than it would normally with fewer things in between. So fast forward to the spring of 2021. Like I said, this area was tall. It was full of cut plant, ragweed, crown beard, passion flower, etc. And we cut it all down, scraped the surface, and brought in fresh compost. And then we also got to go rock shopping, which was really exciting. So we placed the rocks. So once we had all the new soil brought in, and the reason we did that is because of the seed bank for this garden. As I mentioned, all those species earlier, those more taller, quote unquote, weedier species, they tend to be prolific with their seeds. And we had to get rid of some of that in the top of the seed bank because we still have plants that come up, even though we scraped it and added soil. So then Alix and I single-handedly installed over 400 plants into this garden. If you've seen my presentation on DIY native landscape design, you will have seen the images, the whole process of it, but now you get to see it in its second growing season. So it was planted in 2021 in May. That year, I recall we had tons of rain in June, unlike this year. And so it had a really great start, right? And the maintenance practices that we utilize in this garden are mostly, well, we like to leave the seed heads up in the fall for plants that we want to continue to spread, much like the pale purple coneflower here. You want to get up close and take a look at this cutie. So echinacea species are actually short-lived perennials. They do come back every year, but I suspect that one of the reasons why they're prolific with their seeds is because they are shorter lived. So they don't necessarily live for like tens of years, but they do spread and reproduce, which is great. So there are certain species like the pale purple coneflower here, or the yellow coneflower, the Echinacea paradoxa. And Al, feel free to pop into the bed. Don't try this at home, kids, or do.
I'm being very careful.
So you can see Echinacea paradoxa. This is the only true yellow coneflower. You might often see plants referred to as coneflower. Like I think there's a sweet coneflower, which is actually Rudbeckia, but this is the only true yellow species of Echinacea. And paradoxa indicates that it's kind of a paradox that it's yellow instead of pink. So we like to leave these seed heads up once they're done flowering, not only to spread and continue to fill out the garden, but also to provide seed and food for our birds like the goldfinches. So if you tuned into Larry on the Prairie several months ago with Deep Roots, he talked about how American goldfinches are one of the few birds that can feed their babies seed. You know, if you think about it, most baby birds have to eat things like caterpillars, but there is the exception of the American goldfinch. So I think that's
and they're one of the latest breeding birds because they have to wait for the seeds to mature on these plants. So their babies are born at a later time when there's,
and then they grow up really quick. Is that right?
Yeah,
cool. I love that. I didn't know that until
I love that. And I always tell people, you know, with echinacea, especially with purpurea, but also with these echinaceas, it's instant goldfinches. You plant one in your yard, you're gonna get goldfinches in that year. So it's like instant gratification as far as birds and flowers go.
Right. And if you all, as you know about native plants, there's not much instant gratification in the process, but coneflower definitely will get you there. If you may be familiar with the Echinacea purpurea, which is the typical regular.
Did you almost call it basic? Coneflower. It's
honestly,
where you
it's
have
one of my
to-
favorites. I remember
It
it in my
is.
mom's garden as a kid. It's quintessential. I'm not
Yes.
not base. I apologize. Echinacea purpurea, wherever you are.
It's very important.
It's very important.
and
But,
very
but
adaptable.
try these too, because these are
Yes.
really fun. They
These are level 2 coneflowers.
They are level
right?
2. So show them this weirdo right here.
Okay, this is so fun.
So we're not really sure what's going on with this. I'm gonna talk to Merv later and see what he thinks. But sometimes coneflowers hybridize or create different forms or variations. So I'm not a botanist, so I'm not entirely sure what is happening, but it's notably paler than the others. And I have heard it's not out of the question that Echinacea pallida and Echinacea paradoxa will cross hybridize. So more on that later. But
so we've got, this happens often at the Discovery Center where we have like 3 shades of one plant in one area, and this is one of them, and it's one of my favorites. We have a spiderwort like that too. It's really fun.
That's cool. Okay, so we're gonna peek over here. Actually, Al, I think I'll have you come over to this side.
Yeah.
So we can get a good look at some of these cuties.
I'm trying to be very
So this
careful.
is the other thing about planting such a nice, dense garden is, well, one, you don't have to weed as much. Truly, we just weed the edge of the bed, which we'll show here in a moment. But before we get over to that side, I just want to show you what I've done with this rock here. So this is a dolomite limestone rock that I got to pick out. I chose these rocks thinking about Missouri geology. So I wanted to make sure I was picking rocks that are native here. So sandstone and limestone are the rock features in this garden. And little did I realize when I picked out this beautiful rock, it's the perfect chair. So even before I knew it was the perfect chair for people, I had intended to plant into this. But knowing that it could get damaged from people, seeing this and wanting to come and sit on it, I did decide to plant 3 Missouri native succulents / cactus. We have the Eastern prickly pear cactus, which is native here in Missouri. It does have.
I'm going to show this one because it has a little buddy on it.
I love that. So, yeah, it. Look at those cuties right there. So it has.
Is that called a pup? I don't know what the babies are called. It probably has a cute name.
If someone knows what the babies are called, let us know for the prickly pear. But this part is very soft. But I don't know if you can see, keep it right there, Al.
Sorry.
If you can see those little red bits there, those are very fine spines, and they will get in your skin and just be a little itchy. But there are also larger spines which stay on the plant. But it's a very cool dry glade species, right? You'll typically find these out in our native glades. But this is perfect. And honestly, this was kind of an experiment for me. I decided, we knew we wanted this to be a planter. And I know there are different ways you could go about it, like with landscape fabric and stuff. But I just kind of went for it thinking, well, let me just do an experiment. If it doesn't work out, I will adjust and refine it. So I added soil. I have these rocks here to kind of hold up this wall. And then I also planted wild stone crop, which is one of our sedums here.
Oh, look, there's a little fly on that one.
Oh, that's cute. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, right there. So this is a cute little succulent. These work great in dry conditions as well. And then this little one here, which we'll see a better example of when we get to the edge, is rock pink. So you can see 3 native succulent, or 2 succulents and a cactus hanging out here in this planter. I watered it maybe initially when I planted it and haven't watered it since. And it's doing great. And I've actually noticed, well, there are no squirrels hanging out up here anymore.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it used
squirrels.
to be a walnut crunching.
Yeah. Show them this little element down here too. So all of this to say, like, you may have some nice little rock features in your yard. And if you have full sun or even part sun conditions, notice this is covered in shade for a couple hours throughout the day. It can handle that. And just, maybe you can add some nice succulent elements to your landscape in that way.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, we just got back from the Ozarks, and we were noticing that it's definitely, this week is butterfly milkweed week down in the Ozarks, and they're just growing out of the cracks of rocks. So like, why not just try? Why we can't keep it happy in our good soil and our nice rain? So try some.
Sometimes you need to struggle.
Sometimes they do, yeah.
Well,
so think of rocks for an option for for
Can you
planters.
speak a little bit more about that, Al, in terms of, you know, thinking about the Ozarks, which is much further south, it's a lot drier, a lot rockier, and in in Kansas City, rather, there's a lot more clay, right?
Yes, a lot more clay. So what we do to try and make plants happy, which doesn't always work. I mean, what I call it, the Discovery Center is like a native plant zoo. We have plants from all over the state, and we try hard to replicate their natural environments, but it doesn't always go well, and they're not always very happy with it. So in the case of butterfly milkweed, sometimes we will try amending the soil, adding sand or rocks to it, because what ends up happening is that when you have clay soil and you plant these plants that really need some nice drainage, you end up drowning their roots because of the clay compaction underneath them. So that is one thing you can try, is adding stones or sand to kind of amend that soil underneath.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And we'll actually head over to a milkweed here in a second and see how well it's doing in this garden. We weren't sure.
Yeah.
Every year, it's, for me anyway, just knowing how rich our soil here at the Discovery Center is, we weren't sure if it was too rich and too baby. That's the issue with butterfly milkweed, right?
Yeah, but I think also it benefits, well, we'll bring this up too, but it also benefits from being very nicely taken care of, like given it space too, because it gets lost in some of our other beds, and then it doesn't like that either. It's very picky.
So before we move on from this section, because we still have so many more plants to cover, right below you, or actually maybe come over here, I want to show you the wild petunia, or hairy petunia, Ruellia humilis. Look how beautiful this is. So there are different kinds of native petunias. This is one of our native ones. There's this one, and then there's Ruellia. Oh, help me out, Al. What's the clump forming? Struppins. And that's more of a upright woodland species.
Yeah.
But I love this hairy petunia because it tends to crawl up through grasses. So you'll notice if you look right here, if you look at my hands, you see that? So this is eyelash grass, Bouteloua gracilis. And once that wild petunia gets a little taller, it will actually climb up through some of these grasses here, which I think is a really lovely attribute for the wild petunia.
Sorry. I'm trying to, I got it. They're hard.
So I think something to keep in mind with your gardens when you're designing them is don't forget your grasses, right? Or your sedges. Not only does it add more biodiversity to your garden, but look at how nice this fine texture is compared to all these broad leaves. And then sometimes, like I said, with the wild petunia, they can even work together structurally to grow together. And
and Matt, I want to mention my wild petunia is one of Matt Bunch's favorite flowers. He introduced it in the front drop seed beds up there.
Shout out to Matt Bunch.
Yes, he's our favorite, and the source of a lot of really cool plants here at the Discovery Center.
So one last thing about this plant. You know why it's called eyelash grass? Because it looks like fake eyelashes. How cool is that?
It does look like purple eyelashes.
And it's really easy to grow from seed too. So definitely consider adding that. If you don't have grasses in your garden, check it out. So this is, I would say, on this side of the garden. Let's go ahead and step out so we can take a broader look at the place. Just so folks can kind of see how the sun is hitting it right now. Let me do a quick scope, if you don't mind. Okay. So very sunny here on the far east side. And then as you hit the middle, it starts to get some shade this time of day. And if you were to look up, let me see if I can do that. And this way, there are 2 hackberry trees. And that is what is casting our shade, which is not too much of a problem, again, because this garden does get mostly full sun. So even though this part is in shade right now, it is going to get blasted by hot afternoon sun once it comes past the trees. So it'll still get probably 3 or 4 more hours of sun after the shade has passed. So I want to talk about the namesake of this garden. And Al, I want you to see if you can find a caterpillar.
Oh, I can't. I'm bad at this game. I'll try.
So this garden is, and Al, do you mind grabbing the umbrella? Yeah. We're going to make sure our camera doesn't succumb to the heat today. So this garden is named after Missouri evening primrose, which is Anithera macrocarpa. I planted over 90 of these plants in this garden here. And the reason I did is because I'm a nerd. And I know it doesn't look like much right now, but these flowers earlier this month were had their bright yellow cup flowers, and they would bloom once a day. Like each flower would bloom and then it would die back. And here are the seed pods that are left. Thank you, Al. And
half blown down at the end.
oh, is there? Let's go take a look. But
you told me we thought about juicing the garden for you today, but that wouldn't be realistic. So
yeah,
we left it dry.
Yeah, so actually that's brings up a pretty good point. We haven't watered this garden at all this year. Someone commented on our Instagram that the garden looked healthy, and it does, but you know, we haven't done anything to make it that way. It's all doing it itself. So here, let me get down a little closer. This is the end of the Missouri evening primrose. It's sad and wilted now, but when it's at its peak, it is gorgeous and kind of soft, not feathery, but it reminds me of like a flowy skirt, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And the reason I picked this, I said, it's because I'm a nerd, but let me tell you more why I'm a nerd. It's because this plant is typically pollinated by the white-lined sphinx moth, which I think is really cool. Moths and wasps and flies are some of our most important pollinators next to bees, and they're often underrated. So I just wanted to bring that up and pay homage to our underrated and underdog pollinators of the native plant world.
I didn't find. They look exactly like this. The white-lined sphinx moth caterpillars.
Will you hold that again?
They're a hornworm caterpillar, and they look exactly like this spotty green pod.
So, you know, maybe
they're in here, but I can't see.
They're in here. You know what else is in here? Turtles.
Can I tell them?
Please.
Okay, so there's a couple spots in this bed where things kind of kept going missing, and I got to tell this to Lisa Richter yesterday because she was like, I could give you some sedum for those spots, and I was like, actually, here's what happened. We kept seeing these spots get messed up and dry, but they looked like the plants just died because the mulch was still there. They looked undisturbed aside from that. Well, it turns out our red-eared sliders from the pond love laying eggs in this bed. So they come in, they dig a hole, they lay their eggs, and then they put all the mulch back. And in this case, like pebble mulch and stuff. So it looks like a professional job.
I know.
And you could never tell there was a turtle nest there, except that the plants were dead for seemingly no reason.
I was wondering what kept happening to the rose verbena.
Yeah.
And I think we now know.
Yes, we know. The turtles needed a nest. That's all
Which
right.
honestly,
That's all right. We plant the turtles,
blessed, right? Like that's why we plant for this. If turtles dig up your plants, add more plants. Rabbits eat your plants, add more plants. There are certain things that are more tolerant, but they're part of the ecosystem too, you know? Okay, so now I want to come down here and give you just this angle for a moment. Do you mind holding this?
Hold that?
Yeah, thank you. We have an umbrella, folks.
We're not going dark this time.
No way, Jose. So take a look here. Oh yeah. We have a little, I scared our pollinator friend, but anyone know what this one is? Butterfly milkweed, also known as Monarch's Delight, also known as butterfly weed, also known as Asclepias tuberosa, which to me sounds like a magic spell. But it is not. It is one of our lovely milkweeds. Notice how short it grows. It's not very tall, maybe a foot and a half. It's really laying down
the ones
this
we
year.
Saw in the prairie this weekend were
like
taller
2.5.
because
Yeah.
they were in a competition situation.
Yeah. So so you all may be familiar with butterfly milkweed. It can be tricky to grow, but so far this has worked out pretty well in this garden. Again, we planted it in 2021, and there were 3 plants in here, and this year there are only 2. So I'd say those are pretty good odds. But Al, will you talk a little bit about the interesting aspect of pollinators and milkweed?
Yeah, so I'm seeing we had a honeybee on here earlier. Now there's a bee mimic hoverfly pollinating it. And so are you talking about the legs getting stuck? Okay. So sometimes the bees, when they go on the milkweed, I can't show you you'll have to look up the diagram of the flower because the shape of the flower, we can't get that detailed here, but the shape of each flower is very unique, and it's designed to trap the pollinator's legs. So they get stuck in between these little parts of the petals, and then that's the pollen comes off on their legs, and when they pull them out, and then they go to the next flower. Well, sometimes with some of our bees that aren't strong enough. Now, I've never seen it happen on butterfly milkweed. It's kind of a smaller flower, but mostly it happens on common milkweed that we've seen, right? And so I'm wondering if it has to do with the strength of the pollinators, because typically it would be relying on larger pollinators, not small ones like European honeybees,
Right.
which is what we saw. We saw a European honeybee, and it was stuck in the flower, and we took it off, and then it had all those little pollen things stuck on it. But so sometimes the milkweeds do end up killing the bees. And Cydney, you said you've seen bumblebees and carpenter bees.
I've seen some bumblebees get stuck, but yeah, you're right. It's mostly the smaller ones.
Yeah, there's a hoverfly or a bee mimic fly,
mimic.
right? That's cute.
Oh,
my gosh,
no, I think that's a bee.
is that actually a bee? Okay. Nice.
Okay, so we're gonna sit here and just kind of observe this. I want to talk about rock pink, but I might wait a second and just see, check in with Chris and see if we have any questions that we can answer in the meantime. But I just want y'all just to soak it in. Take it in. Look how beautiful this is.
Yeah, you've Cydney and Alix, so far just brilliant. This is such a beautiful garden, and you've answered one of the key questions that came in early from, I believe, Val. Is this a moist area? And not only is this not a moist area, but you have not watered this garden one time this year?
That's correct. Yeah, we haven't watered it this year. I would say the east side is definitely drier. I would argue it probably gets slightly moister towards the hackberry and towards the other side of the prairie. What do you think, Al? Maybe not moist, but more average towards that end. But
just the thing that's making it drier here is the sun exposure.
For
the
sure.
reason that it's maybe a little moister down there would only be because of not from water source. It would only be because of the partial shade.
Yeah.
And another clarification on that is that the hackberry trees are to the north of this planting. We're looking west where you're standing now, right?
That is
Right.
correct. Yeah. So that is a great question. Yeah. To orient ourselves, the hackberries are on the north side. We are sitting on the east side right now. And we are
sitting on the northeast side.
The northeast side, and we are looking southwest.
Oh, look, a fritillary.
Oh,
dang.
yes.
Sorry, I screamed. This is why I don't do butterflies.
we always scare them away. But if you
But that was a variegated, or was that a that was a variegated?
Yeah, variegated fritillary. We saw
Which
regal fritillaries in the Ozarks this weekend.
We would
too.
die if we saw a regal fritillary here. Probably not going to happen. But we see lots of variegated fritillaries here, which host on the passion vine that grows as a weed in this bed. So that's fine.
Yeah. Something else I want to talk about with this garden is you can't really see them right now. But I want to talk about the next things that'll be blooming in this garden. So I designed this with the idea of it having interest throughout the entire year. So this is really the Missouri Evening Primrose is the first showy thing, followed by what you're seeing now, the cone flowers and the butterfly milkweed, and the grasses starting to grow and flower. And then the next ones will be our blazing stars. So our Liatris species. There are 3. We have prairie blazing star. We have Savannah blazing star, and then what's Liatris aspera? I can never remember the common name. Dotted
button.
I can't remember. I put it in the resources, so Chris will pop it into the chat there. But
rough.
Yeah, so those will be the next ones coming up. And the reason I put multiples of of like echinacea and Liatris is because they will. Sorry about. I don't know if y'all can hear that background sound. Someone decided to chainsaw right behind us. Sorry about that. So the reason we picked multiple species of blazing star is because they will bloom one right after the other. That was actually on a recommendation from Merv Wallace of Missouri Wildflower Nursery. So keeping in mind, right, you can achieve that with the cone flowers too. So in this bed here, you can see we have the butterfly milkweed, and then right behind that is actually 2 types of pink colored cone flowers. We have the pale purple, of course, but then can you notice, and you may not be able to from this image, but come to the Discovery Center and see if you can tell the difference between the pale purple coneflower and the glade coneflower. There are both right here in this garden. And what's interesting is last year, the glade coneflower was the first to bloom, followed by the pallida, the pale purple coneflower. Whereas this year, both the glade coneflower and the pale purple in this spot, anyway, have bloomed at the same time.
Yeah. And you would never find, well, you would very rarely find those in the same spot. So it's really fun to have all the, we have, wait, all together, how many do we have?
Well,
6?
5 or 6. Okay, so we just got, well, let's not talk about all the crazy ones because we're not going to look at them. And I don't.
Well, anyway, there's a lot of different coneflowers, and they, it's fun to see them all next to each other so you can tell the difference. One of the, can I talk about the pollen really quickly? One of the main
Can we
ways
find
you
any
can tell,
pollen?
yeah, one of the main ways you can tell the difference between glade and pale purple coneflower is the pollen color. And so this one is what color? This pollen is yellow. So that makes it, can you see that?
I don't know if they'll be able to see it. Just trust us.
It's yellow.
It's yellow.
Trust me. And so that makes it a glade coneflower,
Right.
because pale purple coneflower has white. And the way you can remember that is what's paler than yellow. White is
Pale purple coneflower. Now we're kind of seeing the backside here. So I can point out the Liatris pycnostacia, the prairie blazing star. So that's gonna be the first one to bloom. It's so cute, and that foliage is so fine. So fine. Looks great.
This is a good indicator plant. When you see the Liatris starting to nod, then you may want to, and especially in your newer beds, you may want to think about watering, because they're gonna be the first ones to sort of dip out. So when they fade like that, it's not that they're dying, it's just that they're trying to retain water until the next rain. So
are you saying we should water Primrose Prairie?
well, I mean, why not? Maybe, every new native garden deserves a few waterings in the first few years. Don't feel bad about it.
Especially when we're going through a drought.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you'll give all the little insects and critters a little.
That's true. Hey, I want to point out one thing that has been a challenge in this garden. We already talked about the sunlight, which I thought would be more of a challenge. And actually, it's been really great. The plants have handled it well because they're used to savanna type landscapes. But I want to talk about the rigid goldenrod, because I love goldenrods and asters, especially for their nutrients for pollinators in the fall. But this seemingly inconspicuous broadleaf plant right here in front of me is our rigid goldenrod. And I performed what Alix lovingly calls the Chelsea chop, and which is cutting it back. I think I did this a few weeks ago, and it is already taller than our blazing star. And this isn't going to bloom for another couple months at least, not until the fall anyway. So what I'm saying is I may have picked a plant that is too large for this space. And that is just based on my personal preference. That's not to say it's not important for pollinators. It's just, I want this garden to have a more maintained quality. And when these plants actually get to their mature height and then bloom, they're going to be taller than Al. And she's a pretty tall drink of water. So
right. and if you want a big, tall, crazy goldenrod bed, which we will have to feature in the fall,
we totally will.
Come to the South Pond, because that's what I did there. I took all the big, crazy goldenrods and put them all in one bed. And so that's, there's a lot of stick goldenrod.
But and like exactly what you're talking about, Al, it's all about right plant for right place, knowing your gardening goals and taking those goals and then picking the right plant for the right place. I said that in reverse, but you know what I mean? It's both. It's all the words. So those are some of the highlights we have here at the garden. Chris, I want to toss it back to you all and see if you have any questions for us.
Yes, again, continuing just to really amaze this space. We've got a couple questions specifically about stone crop and the succulents and cactus, going back to kind of one of the first things you mentioned. Can you, first of all, say, does the stone crop bloom? Do you get flowers on that succulent?
Yes. The stone crop does bloom. Can I show them the?
Yes.
It's the widow's cross, right?
Well, that's
Or
different.
is it a different one?
That's
Okay, never mind. We have another sedum here called Widow's Cross that blooms. This sedum blooms, and I guess I don't know what the flower looks like, so wrong question. It's not blooming now, though, right?
It's not.
No.
Well, I need you to point at the plants over here. Thank you.
And but it does have, what does it have? A white? Is it yellow flower? Chris, do you know? I can't remember now.
I'm having trouble distinguishing between the two. One is yellow and one is white.
Yeah. Ooh, cute.
And then also, does Sedum tornatum in this case, does it do better in kind of a shadier space as opposed to out in a full sun environment?
Honestly, well, I don't know if you have experience, but for me, this is a big old experiment.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure. I don't think we really have good examples of it at the Discovery
No,
Center.
we don't. With the one we have, I'll tell you, the funny thing is the one we have growing is on top of the roof and we can't get to it. It's been up there since before I worked here. I don't know how it got up there, but it's in a tray above the greenhouse. If you go out
It's
the back
so
door.
funny. Maybe Matt Bunch knows. We should ask.
Yeah,
Being
that's
used
probably a bunch of
in a green roof setting.
It is a green roof setting. So I would say it can handle sun.
I would say we're pushing it on shade for this one.
Yeah. And I just saw the lovely folks in our audience chimed in and said their stone crop blooms white. So thank you. We kind of thought that was the case.
To see that.
And regarding that as well, can you just give us a quick difference between cactus and succulent? Is it like all collies are dogs, all cactus are succulents, but not vice versa?
Okay. Let me bring it back to our faces because I want to be honest with you all. I don't know. My background is not botany, but I will find out. And that's the beauty of being a naturalist, is knowing that you have the resources to find the answers when you may not know.
And I bet someone knows in the chat that will give us a quick
Yeah.
answer. I know that I've killed all the cactus and succulents that I've tried to keep in my home. So they're both equally hard for me to maintain inside my house.
Yeah.
So we're so excited to have some native succulents and cactus that we can have outside and let loose and free.
Maybe this will be the year we learn more about succulents. And actually, I will challenge myself to do that just so I can relay back to you all what I find out later.
Excellent. I think we got time for a couple more questions here. Remarkable attendance today. Some 140 folks tuning in for us today here.
Awesome.
Do a couple things about Blazing Star, some anecdotes about them being heavily grazed, heavily browsed, and also then short-lived by either by way of that or just by nature. Do you find that you have browsing pressure in this garden with your liatris species, and B, are the Blazing Stars, those liatris, short-lived perennials, or do you see them lasting?
I love this question. Do you want me to do it?
Yes, I don't know what you're gonna say.
Okay, so the answer comes to us from Shaw Nature Preserve, from Scott
Woodbury.
Scott Woodbury, because he told us that actually the Latin name liatris means crow snack or something in Latin. And so here's what happens with your liatris. It may be getting top eaten, but that's not killing it. There's a juicy little delicious corm at the bottom. They have these corms, and
Kind of
apparently
looks like a tuber, kind of.
yeah, like a little tiny potato. And apparently those are the most delicious treats for corvids and for bulls. And so even if they're getting top eaten, that should really kill them after the first few years. The eating and ripping out of the corm is actually what's doing it a lot. So at Shaw, they actually plant their liatris as an annual. They don't even bother keeping it around as a perennial. They plant it like
that's probably a more extreme situation.
Yes, they must have a crow population and a vole population that goes out of control. We have definitely seen that sort of thing happen here at the Discovery Center, but I have not seen it yet in this bed, and I think it is because of the competition. There's not just like one little liatris sitting by itself.
Well, and that's something to think about too. If your plants are getting totally demolished, you may need, I know you're going to hate to hear me say this, that you need to plant more, but that is kind of the thing. It is. Well, because if you have just one plant in a sea of mulch or just on its own, it's like an invitation for the wildlife to come eat that plant. And of course, like that, that's part of our goal here, is to support wildlife and as a food source, right? But in your garden, you want it to get established first, probably before it becomes a food source for your wildlife. So plant as tight as you can. If you are dealing with a big space, start small, start like one section, plant it really tight, and then progress over the seasons. That would be my recommendation. But we don't deal with deer here.
No, and we do have rabbits and crows. We just also have so much for them to eat that they don't really bother with our bigger plants that don't taste too good after they're in the seedling stage.
Yeah.
That's a great response. Lots of positive feedback about that pressure. And Jillian Johnson gets the gold star for the answer today, that cactus are succulents, but not all succulents are cactus.
Yay!
Succulents do not belong to one botanical family, but up to 40, where cactus belongs to Cactaceae. Ding, 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 ding. Jillian Johnson, the prize.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is what I love about these programs. I know you all feel like you learn a lot, but we learn a lot too.
Oh, every time.
Every day
I learn
too.
something on this program and every day.
And that's what we love about nature and what we love about our jobs is we will never know everything about anything. And I like that. Keeps a nice challenge going.
Well, excellent. Just a couple quick ones here. As we're coming up, it's 42 after.
We're good.
Now, and this is not a short question. Can you discuss butterfly milkweed cultivars? And for use in a pollinator garden like this, is this something that you can speak to at the moment? Difference in nutrition, quantity, quality of pollen? And I will harken back to our April Lunch and Learn with Scott Woodbury. That recording available on our YouTube and website, where Scott gets into an in-depth conversation about cultivars and the challenges in their value. But specifically with your butterfly milkweed, do you use the true species?
Yes. Yeah. Everything that we're planting in the garden are true natives. There are some exceptions at the Discovery Center that are trees that were planted like over 20 years ago before we had well-established nurseries.
And one hollyhock that we keep around for Anita herself. Because it's her favorite flower. But other than that, we do not cultivate any non-native.
No. And, I think, I don't think there is a blanket statement for this. Sorry, my arm's falling asleep. Yeah. So I don't think there's a blanket statement for, cultivars, but I would actually shift the conversation to what are your gardening goals? If your goals are to simply have aesthetics, then you may be drawn to cultivars. But I would challenge you, if that is the case, to find native alternatives that fit those aesthetics, because you'll be blown away by what we have. But the reason why, if you want to support wildlife, it's important to stick to true natives is because we know for sure with our true natives, the quality of the nutrition that they're offering wildlife. Yeah. They've evolved together for thousands of years. What we don't know is when a plant is modified to have a different color. What we do know that bees and birds see plants are colored a very different way than us. So we know that is immediately changing the animal's perspective of it being a potential food source. But what we don't know is when you get down to the nutrition level, what the nutrition levels are for cultivars. So I would say, again, I'm not going to demonize cultivars, but I'm going to say, think about what your gardening goals are. If you want to support wildlife, true natives are your way to go.
That's a great response and a great suggestion to folks who want to support the native plant nursery industry. Always ask for true species and support your vendors here locally who provide true native plants to skip all concern or question about the actual value for wildlife. It's 1:45, and this has been just, again, an amazing tour of one of just many sites there at the Anita Gorman Discovery Center. And as always, the two of you both just delightful hosts, brilliant insight. And we are all very grateful.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
I've got one more exciting thing to just tell everyone. If you want to learn more about gardening with native plants, join us. We do volunteer work days, as Chris mentioned at the beginning of the show, come garden with me. We work here at the Discovery Center 3 times a month. I'd love to have you, and I'd love to nerd out about plants with you. So come join us. Get your nails dirty.
That's right. It's really fun work days. And could I plug one quick program?
Oh, yeah.
In a couple of weeks, Saturday the 24th, I'm leading an ethnobotany of the Midwest program, which is going to be, I meant to mention this during the echinacea talk because echinacea is going to be one of my featured plants. But if you want to come and learn about the history of plants and people, come to that program. There will be lots of hands-on and things to sample and lots of plants to look at. Yeah.
It'll be
Saturday
fun.
the 24th, all ages, all day, free at the Discovery Center.
And I'll include that in the resources I send out to y'all too, so you can join us. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
Well, thank you. And thank you, audience, for all your insightful questions. Those we didn't get to today live, we'll include in resources to follow up with. And thank you for joining us today for Native Plants at Noon with the Missouri Department of Conservation. If you've missed any of our episodes, you can find them all at deeproots.org. We record and post each one. And while you're on our site, we would be so grateful if you would consider making a donation to Deep Roots to help offset the cost of producing educational content and to support the programs and the outreach and education that we provide for our community free of charge. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you back here July 6th as we return for our next Lunch and Learn webinar. Have a beautiful day. And remember, what you plant matters.